I've been fighting with the dark, I can't escape, no. They've been calling out my name, I hear the echoes. Shadows creeping in my room, I feel them close. Oh, what goes bump in the night, I think it knows. Oh, late night, red eyes, demons in disguise. I can hear them talking, whispering through the pines. Try to run away, but they always right behind. What goes bump in the night, I think it's in my mind. I see faces in the smoke when I exhale. Try to scream but no one listen, like I'm in hell. I've been tripping, I've been lost inside my own fears. They've been watching, got me drowning in my own tears. I can feel it lurking, I can feel it lurking. Every time I close my eyes it's working. Try to tell myself it's fake, it ain't real, but it's scratching at the walls I can hear. Fell asleep with the lights on, still see shadows move. I've been taking all these drugs, but they don't change the mood. Every time I try to run, I just end up doomed. I swear they coming soon. Late night, red eyes, demons in disguise. I can hear them talking, whispering through the pines. Try to run away, but they always right behind. What goes bump in the night, I think it's in my mind. I've been drowning in my thoughts like a deep lake. I've been trying to keep my soul, but it might break. Something knocking on the door, but it won't wait. Tell me, do I open up or do I fade away? I've been feeling like I'm cursed, like a ghost town. I've been running, but it's pulling, I can't slow down. I can see them in the trees when the wind howls. Hear them laughing in my dreams, I don't know how. Tell me, tell me, tell me what you want from me. I've been trying to break away, but it won't set me free. I've been lost inside a place where the dead don't sleep. If I vanish in the night, would they even weep? Yeah. Late night, red eyes, demons in disguise. I can hear them talking, whispering through the pines. Try to run away, but they always right behind. What goes bump in the night, I think it's in my mind. Bump in the night, I think it's in my mind. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
You're muted, Riley.
You could just take it then. Jeez.
Hello, everybody. Yeah. Welcome to another edition of What Goes Bump in the Night. I am Trevor Jensen, and alongside me, as always, is
Riley Clark.
And tonight, we have a fantastic episode for you guys. One that mystifies, is a little bit terrifying, and still
might be a little painful.
Yeah, I was gonna say, still just like lives in everybody's forefront of their mind state at all times, because I'm gonna go out on a limb and say there are apex predators, and they've been dormant for a long time.
Predators. So get your neck guards, get your wooden stakes, get your onions, get your silver bullets, because we're going vampire hunting.
All that shit. The break of dawn's coming. We're gonna survive the night.
But before that, we have to clear the notifications, and the first one that I want to clear out of the way is we have reached 800 subscribers. That is insane. And it's still cold. We can still power plunge. So let's get me and Trevor swimming in the water. Ashley said she'll film it. So
fuck, that's gonna suck, but I'm so here for it. 200 peeps go. Just keep telling our friends, keep getting the word out there. You guys are absolutely motherfucking wonderful, and we love you all.
Yes.
Thank you guys again.
And if you're new here and want to help us reach that goal, make sure you like and subscribe and join the night crew today. It's free, and it is not exclusive to just today.
It's free real estate.
So if you love hanging out with us every week, talking about spooky stuff, talking about our topic today, which is vampires, then you have found the right spot on YouTube for you.
Most definitely. So yeah, like I was saying, I believe that there are apex predators, that they're real and that they've been dormant, and we see very small indications that they are probably still among us. I mean, if you look in our government right now, there's like 300-year-old vampires collecting Social Security, so
There's some sucking going on there. So
there's some sucking going on indeed, sir. So why don't we just do what we always do at this point, and let's start off with some good old hard facts and history, and then we'll give you guys some of our opinions, and then we'll
yes.
go from there.
Yeah. So the ancient origins, vampires in early civilizations, the concept of vampiric entities is as old as civilization itself, appearing in cultures across the globe long before the term vampire was even coined. Vampires in the earliest form were not the charming, erotistic creatures of Eastern European folklore, nor were they the tragic, tortured souls of modern literature. Rather, the oldest vampire myths tell a more terrifying and grotesque story, one of demons, restless spirits, and undead predators that have haunted humanity for a millennia. These early vampiric entities were often viewed not as sophisticated or alluring beings, but as horrifying manifestations of death and decay. They were seen as vengeful spirits or malevolent creatures that defied the laws of nature, life, and death, rising from the graves or lurking in shadows to prey on the living. In many cultures, they were believed to be the cursed dead, returning from the beyond the grave to drain the life force of blood of the living, spreading disease or causing untimely death. Long before the vampire became a symbol of immortality and subduction, it was primarily a figure of horror associated with death, the supernatural, and the fragility of human existence.
Oh, fragility.
Fragility, yeah. What was I trying to say?
Whoops, words are hard.
Words are hard in the chat. Across ancient civilizations from Mesopotamia to Greece, from Egypt to Slavic Europe, tales of such creatures spread, adapting to the unique fears and beliefs of each culture, but always centering around the terrifying idea that death was not an end, but a getaway for something worse. These myths painted vampires as monstrous beings that defined both nature and mortality, serving as stark reminders of humanity's most primal fears, the fear of death itself, and the fear of what might rise from the grave.
Boom, boom, boom. And I mean, like, we can go on a limb here and say every culture from like pretty much like precipice, like when everything began, probably has some type of vampiric style of story. And that it's not just like humanoid creature sucking blood. Like you have the chupacabra for one. That's a good instance of like that's
like a newer
creature.
one. That's like a newer one.
But you could say that's a vampire because it sucks blood. So now, are we going to classify all of these creatures that aren't necessarily like humanoid, like how it's saying they were seen as not, like more like really fucked up creatures? Like these things are nasty.
Could they be aliens?
Oh, we're starting early with this one. Could they be aliens? They could be aliens.
Let's start from like the beginning of time.
So we can go ahead and we'll just do the oldest bloodsuckers, the Mesopotamian vampires from 4000 to 2000 BCE. So this one's the Ikamu, I think is how you say it. I've never heard of this one.
Ikamu. I like it.
Ikamu.
Every time we say these like weird names,
I just feel like I'm butchering.
Not trying to disrespect any cultures or anything, but it sounds like gibberish.
Yeah, I just really suck at reading this. So the spirits of the unburied dead. The Ikamu are one of the earliest known vampire-like entities originating from ancient Mesopotamian cultures. They were spirits of the dead, particularly the souls of individuals who had not been properly buried or had died under tragic, violent, or unnatural circumstances. According to Mesopotamian beliefs, the soul of the person was supposed to pass into the afterlife through proper rites and burial. But when these rituals were neglected or violated, the soul could become restless and malevolent. So these spirits were often described as wandering the earth, seeking out living to drain their energy, a practice that aligns with modern vampire myths. The Ikamu didn't require a physical body to perform their attacks, which made them particularly feared, as they could infiltrate the living in more subtle ways. They could attach themselves to a person, draining their vitality over time, leading to symptoms such as fatigue, illness, and sudden death. What the fuck? Victims might experience a gradual decline in health with no apparent causes, making the attacks of the Ikamu all the more terrifying. The belief in the Ikamu is supported by the archaeological discoveries of burial rituals designed to protect the living from these spirits. Common practices including placing protective amulets or symbols near the grave, using incantations, and sometimes even burying the deceased with tools or objects to prevent their spirits from rising. The presence of the burial protections suggests that the ancient Mesopotamians took the threat of the Ikamu seriously, reflecting the profound influence that death and the afterlife had on their culture. So this is like really early on, people's going, hey, hold up.
We got to protect the body from what happens after death.
Literally a vitality vampire. They don't suck your blood, they suck your life force.
Is that where we got the ick from? That's a good point, Jess.
That is where we got the ick from. The ick, they really do put the ick in Ikamu.
All right, next we got Lilu and Lilitu, the demonic night spirits.
Fuck.
The Lilu and Lilitu are key figures in the early development of vampire lore and Mesopotamia mythology, with their bloodthirsty nature often tied to dark forces and predatory instincts. These entities are particularly important as they represent the early archetypes for night demons and blood-drinking creatures in the broader Near Eastern traditions. Lililu, God, that's a tongue twister, I tell you. Lililu was a malevolent male spirit often associated with the night. In many descriptions, Lilu was considered a demon who preyed on women, especially young women and those who were unmarried. His actions were not unnecessarily confined to physical attacks, but were also believed to drain life force from its victims, causing excruciating weakness and sometimes death. The association with night suggests that Lilu operated under the cover of darkness, possibly drawing from a primal fear of the unknown and the unseen dangers that lurk at night. I imagine Lily 2 is probably the exact opposite of that.
I would imagine.
Lily 2, the female counterpart to Lililu, is a practically intriguing figure as she later evolved into the figure of Lilith in Jewish folklore, who was often associated with vampire myth. In Mesopotamia lore, Lily 2 was a demon who specifically targeted infants, children, and pregnant women, feeding on their blood and life essence. Some text describes as a seductress who would lure her victims into her grasp, echoing themes of sexual danger and vulnerability. The ancient texts portray Lily 2 as a nocturnal predator, feeding off the life force of vulnerable individuals during sleep. She was often depicted as a night demon, her presence associated with illness, stillbirths, and infant mortality.
Jesus.
But wait, there's more.
But wait, there's more.
As Lily 2 evolved into the more widely recognized Lilith in later Jewish traditions, her vampire traits proceeded, often characterized by her role as a seductress and killer of infants.
Jesus God.
The connection between Lilith and Lilith is evident in her depiction as a hardbringer of death, often seen as a supernatural creative that preys on the most innocent and defenseless members of society. This bitch is fucked up.
Yeah, that's fucked up, dude.
This figure would later become a symbol for female power, rebellion, and in some cases, dark sexuality in folklore and literature.
Jesus God. Fuck that bitch.
So those vampires, they don't like men, apparently.
Well, and like to be like the death bringer to children, like I don't love that.
That's,
I really don't love that.
I mean, think about it though. Back then, they had to explain that stuff somehow.
True. It's still just like what a wild way to just decide, hey, we are going to explain this by Lilith is now exterminating the children.
Obviously, if we have stillburns happening, it's because of Lilith, the spirit demon.
The Dark Mother, indeed. Oh, that's
100%.
fucking that does give a little bit of chill down the spine when you think about like a harbinger of death. Like I don't love those type of omens. Please don't
reaper.
bring those to me.
A real reaper.
A real reaper, indeed. So we can talk about some protections. So these entities we can protect ourselves from. Maybe these are even like still usable because Mesopotamia really isn't that long ago. In all
Or, I mean,
hindsight.
were those people right? Are these real things? I don't
That's
know.
the other thing is they probably did nail a bunch of it, and we're just kind of sitting here like, I like cell phones and McDonald's.
Have you been on X today?
Have you been on X today? God damn it. It's funny. So, given the severity of the threat posed by these vampiric spirits, the ancient Mesopotamians devised several protective measures to safeguard against the This is really a mouth, like literally a mouthful. Lilu, Lilitu, and Ikamu.
Here, chat. You guys can see the pain.
It is pain. When you read this, it's hard, it's pain. These measures reflected a deep cultural understanding of the need to control death and supernatural forces that could disturb the natural order. So they would use protective amulets. Amulets were commonly used as a defense against the dangerous entities. These protective charms were often inscribed with symbols or prayers, invoking divine protection or warding off evil spirits. Popular amulets included representations of gods, demons, or animal figures believed to have protective properties, such as lions or bulls. These items were often buried with the dead or placed at the entrance of homes to prevent these malevolent spirits from entering. Then you have burial rituals. Proper burial was essential to ensure the peace of the soul and prevent it from returning as an ikamu. The Mesopotamians placed great emphasis on funeral rites and placement of the body. For example, in cases where a person's death was deemed unnatural, such as a violent or untimely death, specific measures were taken to prevent the soul from wandering. Some texts suggest that the deceased were buried with tools or even with their mouths sealed to prevent them from becoming restless spirits. And then we got exorcisms and incantations. In cases where Ikamu were believed to be tormenting the living, Mesopotamians priestesses would perform exorcisms to rid the person of spirits' influence. These rituals often involve chanting specific incantations or invoking deities or protective spirits to drive the malevolent entity away. Certain offerings might also be made to appease the restless dead, ensuring they do not return to haunt the living.
I'm gonna show everybody something. I don't know if this was Mesopotamia era, but I do know this is an ancient thing that was found. It's a skull with a rock in it so that it couldn't become a vampire and the tooth pulled.
Oh, yes, that would be a very much so burial like ritual right there, where it's like, I don't want them to come back and bite me.
So I mean, this is the kind of stuff that I think they were really doing back then.
I mean, do you think that now that we've gotten away from it, that we're seeing more restless spirits and things?
I don't know.
It's quite the conundrum, I would say.
I don't know. We haven't been doing the kind of rituals we do after death for technically all that long.
Very much so.
And every culture does it different.
Speaking of cultural change,
like if I'm a Viking, I want to be set off on a sail and lit on fire. So
I was going to say
go
a Viking send-off is the way to go. Valhalla, here I come.
All right. Let's move forward in time a little bit. Ancient Egyptian vampire lore, the blood drinking gods.
So fucking badass. I'm just gonna say that up top though. The blood drinking gods are so fucking badass.
Sekhmet.
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 Yep. I think that's how you say it.
Sekhmet, the bloodthirsty goddess. Sekhmet, one of the most powerful and feared deities in Egyptian pantheon, was depicted with the head of a lioness and the body of a woman. She was associated with war, destruction, and healing, but also had a notorious reputation for her bloodlust. The myth of Sekhmet, bloodthirsty, according to the myth, is the destruction of mankind, also called the Lama of the destruction of mankind. Sekhmet was sent by the sun god Ra to punish humanity for rebelling against him. Her task was to punish the humans for the disobedience by slaughtering them. She was so fierce in her bloodthirst that she continued her rampage without rest. Overcome by her bloodlust, she became increasingly uncontrollable, and the gods feared she would annihilate all of humanity. To stop her, the gods devised a cunning plan. They tricked Sekhmet by flooding the land with a large quantity of beer mixed with red dye, resembling blood. Sekhmet believed it was actual blood, drank the beer in a frenzy. Eventually, she became intoxicated and fell asleep, allowing the gods to stop her destructive rampage. However, her insatiable thirst for blood was not forgotten, and Sekhmet became associated with the idea of a divine and destructive force that needed to be appeased. The myth portrays Sekhmet not only as a powerful and dangerous goddess, but also a figure who symbolized the uncontrollable and ravenous nature of bloodlust. While Sekhmet was a goddess of healing as well, the duality between destruction and healing reflects her complex role in Egyptian mythology. She was revered and feared for her power and connection to blood as both a life-giving and life-taking force, ties her themes to the later echoed in vampire lore.
It's so interesting. Now we have a deity that is like basically a vampire in her own essence.
I mean, she basically indulged herself to death because she was so bloodthirsty for death.
That's what I'm saying, dude. Like,
That's
poetic.
poetic.
It's poetic in its own right. And then now we have even more fun stuff that is of Egyptian lore, which is this is a fun one. Udug-hul? Is that how you think you'd say that?
That's what I'm going with.
Udug-hul?
You dug. Just say you dug.
Udug-hul. Udug-hul. The evil spirits. The concept of the evil spirits, also referred to as the Udug, is deeply rooted in the Egyptian understanding of death and the afterlife, and the fear of the dead returning to life. These spirits, through their name, translates roughly as evil spirits, are particularly interesting because they resemble many characteristics of the vampire archetype seen in later folklore. So, reanimation of corpses. The Udug-hul were believed to be malevolent entities capable of possessing dead bodies and reanimating them. These reanimated corpses were said to become aggressive, attacking the living and draining their life force or essence. The Udug-hul were seen as a manifestation of the fear that the dead could return to life in a dangerous predatory form, feeding off the living. Their actions closely parallel later vampire legends, where the dead rise from the graves to harm the living and sustain themselves by draining blood or life energy. The connection to Egyptian vampiric entities is the Udug-hul also embody the fear and contamination by death and the idea that certain spirits, especially those that were importantly buried or desecrated, could come back with vengeful intentions. In Egyptian society, burial was a sacred act to ensure the peace of transition of the soul to the afterlife, and a failure to properly care for the dead could lead to the creation of dangerous entities like the Udug-hul. These spirits might be considered the precursor to modern vampire myths, where the dead come back to drain the life of the living. So once again, another big like, hey, we're drawing more parallels to where it's like, you don't bury your dead right, you get vampires. You fucking up.
Have you seen that movie? I just watched not a vampire movie, but a zombie movie the other day, and it's called Dead Don't Die.
Dead don't die.
It's basically like a zombie spoof movie.
I don't think I've seen it, but I absolutely love
Anytime,
the name of that.
like, you know, you're talking about the undead. You think about, you know, zombies that want to eat your brain. Well, that's
Yeah.
kind of like a vampire too. They're thirsty for like something.
They sustain their life force with our life force by extinguishing our life force. It just so happens they turn us into one of them, which also is a zombie, but that's also a vampire. Unless vampire is like different, where you have to meet like a certain criteria to become a vampire too. Unless you're just now food for thought.
See, I've always liked that it was like, I don't know if anyone's ever seen the show called The Origins or the original. I think it's The Originals. That's what it's called.
The Originals?
Yeah, it's like it's a vampire show, and basically only like certain people could become vampires. Like whoever bit you could choose if you were going to be one or not, basically.
Yeah. I mean,
And-
there's an anime that I'm watching right now with Jess where it's the same thing. You have to, it's kind of like one of those cutesy ones where it's like you got to fall in love in order to become a vampire with that vampire. And that's why they don't just procreate and go crazy.
Yeah, The Originals. That's it. Those weeks knows what I'm talking about. Great show if you don't know about it.
Call of the Night is the anime. You should watch that if you like anime. So back to what we were talking about.
So what do you do with these dead people?
What do you do?
Well, there's you know, burial practices, and these are how the Egyptians did it. Ancient Egyptians' burial practices were elaborate and deeply rooted in their religious beliefs, especially the desire to ensure the soul's safe passage to the afterlife. These practices show a strong emphasis on preventing the dead from returning in dangerous form, which may have been connected to early vampire fears. Mummification. We all know that one, I would think.
Yeah, we all know
The
this one.
Egyptians believed that the body had to be preserved for the soul, the Ka, to recognize it and reunite it with the afterlife. Mummification was so sophisticated,
Sorry, mummy.
process that involved removing the organs, drying the body with natural occurring salt, and wrap the body in linen. The careful preservation of the body not only helped prevent decay, but also served as a protective measure against the possibility of the dead rising and returning in an unnatural state. The process aimed to keep the body intact, thereby preventing it from being reanimated
Reanimated.
by malevolent forces. That kind of we kind of mummify people to this day. You know what I
Can't get
mean?
out. You know what I mean? Like, just think
We
about
don't
it.
wrap them, but
we put them in a box. Sorry, that's so dark.
in their best clothes and makeup, all that.
Yep, but I mean, it's the same. You're right, though. It's basically like the same way as we're sealing that so that they can't come back out of it. Which, in a sense, that's not necessarily what it is.
I mean,
But-
creepy knows what they be doing.
They'd be
Dead bodies.
It'd be totally different from what we actually think, isn't it? As funny as that is. No, but as dark as I just made it, it does kind of like play into the fact where it's like that is the process that we go with and that we've ran with for many millennia is how it feels, is bury the dead, which I mean, there's nothing wrong with that, but it kind of also makes me think if we're also trying to keep us from getting like attacked by zombies, vampires, anything else malevolent spirit wise that could come back from the afterlife, yeah, that kind of makes sense.
There we go. Just a hardening liquid instead of a dehydration like old school mummies. There we go.
That's the expert.
In case you wanted to know.
That's the expert
Creepy's
right
got
there.
you.
Creepy's got you. Check out her show, Creepy Confidential. She's on YouTube. She's on all the other podcasting platforms.
Yep.
Also,
quick
those
plug.
dweebs are too. Make sure you check them out.
Quick plug.
Plugs.
Tomb protections and is it amulets or amulets? I don't know.
Amulets.
Egyptian tombs were often filled with offerings to appear the spirits of the deceased and ensure a smooth journey into the afterlife. Additionally, protective amulets were placed within the tomb to ward off evil spirits. Some of these amulets were designed specifically to prevent the deceased from coming back to life. For example, the heart scrab was used to prevent the heart of the deceased from being consumed by evil entities and to ensure that the soul would not be disturbed during its passage to the afterlife.
This I like how you said scarab. It's a scarab. Get it? No, it's the French flair because 100%. I immediately was like, you have a French accent. That's awesome. But like, have you ever seen those those beetles, basically, like the gold
I know
ones?
they are.
Dude. That makes me go, oh yeah, that's what that is. I didn't even realize it, but it's on every tomb. It's in every single what do you call those? It's not sarcophagi. It is sarcophagi.
Yeah,
but
sarcophagus.
didn't even know it.
Yeah, it's all over in their hieroglyphs too.
Mm.
Magical incantations. Egyptians used magical texts such as those found in the pyramid texts in the Book of the Dead to safeguard the deceased from returning in a vengeful form. These texts contained spells that would protect the dead from being turned into Udug or other malevolent spirits. The spells were recited during the burial process to ensure the deceased would not haunt or attack the living. The focus on the death and the afterlife in Egyptian ritual shows a profound concern over the possibility that the dead might return, either as wandering souls or as dangerous creatures like vampires. It makes me wonder, did something happen? Did something actually happen?
Did they have an event where they had to now really
where a bunch of dead people came alive?
It makes you wonder. Also, chat, you guys are hilarious. Patty over here, tempt me with a good time. Haunt me. I dare you.
You know, when you think about those kinds of things, did something happen? Was there because all cultures have it. So something happened where it happened all over the world.
That's what I'm saying. It has to be something based in straight up factual evidence, because every single time we see this in different cultures, there's no way they were speaking to each other. There's no way
obviously it could just be characterizing fears to give them a persona.
I guess, but all of these are very, very similar so far, and we haven't even really touched on what the modern day vampire is yet, but we're getting there. But realistically, you know what I mean? The two very gleaming societies that were our the most forefounders that we could have, both of them had vampiric entities. Maybe they weren't necessarily people, but they were more reanimated bodies, or they were straight up spiritual beings. They still both believed in it. That tells me deep rooted, meaning real. Ancient. Exactly. It's ancient. This has been around for way too long. We be playing with this shit now. So vampires and ancient Egyptian fears of the dead. The fear of the dead returning, whether as spirits or reanimated bodies, was central of many Egyptian burial practices. These concerns may have influenced the development of vampire-like creatures in later cultures. The beliefs that improper burial or dishonored dead might rise to harm the living parallels the concept of vampires in many ancient medieval cultures. We were just saying that. The Egyptian emphasis on protecting the deceased from becoming predatory spirits could be very well laid the foundation for vampiric lore that emerged in later civilizations. So now we can just go ahead and move into the Greeks, the Romans, and the vampiric beginnings here. This is now 1200 BC to 500 CE. So now we're moving into different time periods, which once again, this is spanning so much time. If these are ancient beings that can live forever, we're seeing it.
Yeah, pretty much. Lamia, the child-eating vampire. Lamia's story is one of the most chilling and tragic in Greek mythology. She was a beautiful queen of Libya, and in some versions of the myth, she was the lover of Zeus. Hera, the wife of Zeus, became enraged upon learning of this affair, and in a fit journey of jealousy and revenge, killed Lama's children as
Damn.
punishment for her relationship with Zeus. Hera transformed Lamia. Sorry, is it Lamia?
Lamia? I think it's
Lamia?
Lamia.
Lamia into a monstrous immortal creature who was doomed to roam the earth, preying upon the innocent.
See if I can.
The curse ended transformation. Lamia's transformation was both physical and physiological. She was no longer the queen she was once, but a bloodthirsty monster driven by an insatiable hunger for the blood of infants. Why do I keep getting all these kid-eating?
Dude, I'm so sorry.
Her grief was over the loss of her children, turning into a consuming rage, and she began to abduct and devour the offsprings of others, ensuring that no one else would experience the joy of motherhood without fear. Shape-shifting and seduction. In many versions of the myth, Lamia is depicted as a shapeshifter, sometimes transforming into a serpent-like creature or a hideous monster. The shape-shifting ability is a direct precursor to the later depiction of vampires as a creature who can change their form practically into animals such as wolves or bats. Lamia's allure was not limited to her monstrous appetite. She was also described as seducing men, luring them into their deaths and draining their life force. In some stories, she was said to have the ability to remove her eyes at will and keep them in a jar.
Jesus.
This horrific image of beautiful and predatory. Wait, no, that's wrong. Beautiful but predatory woman feeding on the life of others is a clear influence on the later vampire archetype. Sounds super familiar.
Doesn't it? Doesn't it, dog? And like I was gonna pull up a picture of it, but I'm not joking. I couldn't find one without tits showing. There's none, dude.
They said she was seductive.
But I mean, like, Google, you really just did not come through for me. It's just
Can't
boobs
show it on
everywhere.
YouTube, guys. Sorry.
I couldn't show it. So we can go to the next one. The Empusa, the seductive bloodsucker. Once again, I don't think Google's gonna be our friend on that one. So the Empusa was a shape-shifting female demon in Greek mythology, often associated with the god Hecate.
He
How you
caddy.
say that one?
I'm saying
Hecate.
he
He's
caddy.
got a caddy. Hecate, the goddess of magic. I think it's Hecate. Maybe. I could be wrong. Witchcraft and the underworld. She was known for her ability to transform into different forms, with the most notable being that of a beautiful woman who lured men into their deaths. Dun dun dun. Appearance and transformation. Empusa's ability to shift forms made her a terrifying figure in Greek mythology. In her true form, she was described as having flaming hair, bronze feet. In some versions, they were said to be made of copper or brass, and sharp, bloodthirsty fangs. This description mirrors many later vampire myths, where vampires are often depicted as having abnormal or monstrous physical traits that mark them as supernatural predators. The flaming hair and the unusual feet in particular evoke a sense of unnatural and evoke the same fear that later vampire lore would build upon. Now we get into the seduction style. So Empusa would often appear to men in the guise of a beautiful woman, enticing them into sexual encounters before draining their blood or life essence. This seductive nature is a key characteristic that would become common motif in vampire mythology, particularly in stories about female vampires who prey upon men. Her dual nature as both a seductive beauty and a terrifying monster is reminiscent of the feminine fatale archetype seen in later vampire myths, where the vampire's allure is tied to its ability to ensure and kill its victims. Symbolism and influence. Empusa's role in Greek mythology reflects a deep-seated fear in the female power of sexual danger, as well as the fears of death brought by the supernatural entities. Her connections to Hecate also link her to the dark magic in the underworld. further cementing her as a creature that exists between the realms of the living and the dead. The ways that she blends beauty and monstrosity set the stage for later descriptions of female vampires in folklore, who often combine charm and danger. Bah.
It's a whole lot. And
That's a whole lot.
I'm seeing reoccurring themes, and I think we're probably
I was just
going
gonna
to
say that.
history.
I see the string here. Ooh,
Here we go. Now we're talking about some flying shit.
some strigas.
Some strigas or strix, the winged blood drinkers. The strix were blood drinking creatures in both Greek and Roman mythology. Throughout their prominent depictions come from Roman sources. The Styx were often described as owl-like creatures that preyed upon human flesh and blood. The Romans, who feared them greatly, believed that these creatures were capable of transforming into owls and other birds and would swoop down upon their victims, especially infants and children. Again, I just getting all the
Bro. It's a
I don't know
running
what's going on
theme here.
appearance and abilities. The Strix was often depicted with the features of owls, such as large round eyes and sharp talons, but they also had the ability to transform into human-like shapes. In their human forms, they would resemble women who, under the cover of darkness, would suck the blood of their victims. This transformation into both human and birds form is a feature that closely resembles the later ability of vampires to change shape, whether into a bat or a wolf or other animal forms. Roman fears and rituals. Romans were so fearful of the Strix that they performed anti-vampiric rituals to keep these creatures at bay. The Strix were believed to be witches or demons who used dark magic to prey on the living. As a result, the Romans would prefer rites to protect themselves, including using charms and incantations. These practices indicated a widespread belief in the existence of supernatural creatures that could cause harm to the living by draining their life force, much like the later vampires in later folklore.
That's so fun. Just think about it, dog. Like, once again, we have another culture where this striga is now like this entity that is a bloodthirsty, like nasty being. Once again, another culture having the same thing. What is it? What is happening? And like the shape shifting too. Like now we're getting closer to what they like the new stuff where it's like the bats. Like now you got Vlad turning into a bat. Strigas are definitely very closely related to owls, is definitely what it makes it seem out to be, but also has the same characteristic of a vampire.
Right. No, the myth is transforming in front of our eyes throughout history.
Slowly we're seeing it go from this
started as a demonic spirit, then it became a deity, but an evil deity,
and now it's a physical creature.
Now it's a creature.
I don't know, dude. It adds a lot of validity for me where it's not like it's evolving, but it's staying very, very much so the same, but just very small.
And I know your ears are perking every time the script says predator. You're like,
I live for this. We as a human species are running rampant on this earth, and we are causing.
Little did you know there's a little undertone in this episode, and that's that vampires are just predators.
They are our apex predator, and they will come back and get us, and we need to be prepared for this.
But first, we need to talk about the cultural significance in the Roman and Greek for the Strix. The Strix are an early example of vampire architect in Roman mythology, and their association with owls and darkness highlights their nocturnal nature. Owls were often seen as a creature of mystery and omens in ancient Rome, and their connection to blood-drinking creatures further deepens their association between vampires and the dark, mysterious forces.
Those dweebs said, I'll take vampires over zombies. Hold up. I'm taking zombies because vampires are supernatural apex predators. Vampires are slow meatbags that I'm just gonna whomp with a baseball bat.
That can't die. They're
Yeah,
immortal.
they're basically immortal. You can rip limbs off and they'll just grow it back because vampires are scary creatures. As long as this is what we think is like the prevailing theory here. I was gonna like reply in chat, but I was like, I can't.
I don't
have
want to
say
fuck with a
something.
vampire because
Fuck no.
it's gonna kill me. I got that rare blood type.
Unless like the zombies are like the World War Z zombies where they're like souped up like super zombies, like then maybe we're actually all just fucked.
What if like the blood type's a big deal for them? You know what I mean? Like I need.
Ooh. So like they
need that
like
omega
certain
blood.
ones, yeah, like O negative is like that like exquisite blood, but then you got like booty, like I don't know, like
You're calling blood types booty.
yeah. Well, this is just like for happenstance, like you know,
The
like, I don't
common,
know,
they
like,
got that common blood type.
A
Ugh,
negative or
gross,
whatever.
dude. I can't
Like-
believe you'd even drink that.
But
common
like
blood.
they sink their teeth
Gross.
in and they're just like "Bleh," and they're just I don't fuck ew, that's fucking disgusting. Like never. Maybe I don't know. Like we don't know if they're picky or not. They could be. Oh, I mean, I don't really want to encounter like anything that's gonna really like threaten my life. We'll just stick that one out there. But if I do, I'm taking the zombies over the vampires.
Yep.
So this one's fun. A yo ho ho and a hearty har har. We have blood at the seat of life, influence of vampire lore. So, both the Greeks and the Romans held a deep belief that blood was the seat of life, a concept that would later influence vampire mythology in a significant way. Blood was seen as a vital essence that sustained the living, which, duh. And it was often associated with the soul and the energy that powered the body. Blood as sacred. In ancient Greek and Roman beliefs, blood was often tied to both life and death. The sacrifice of animals or humans in rituals often involved the shedding of blood, and blood was considered both a powerful and dangerous substance. Vampires, as creatures that drink blood and directly tap into the sacred and dangerous force, making them potent symbols of life and death. The undying thirst. The idea that blood is the source of life helped fuel the notion that vampires as immortal beings who must drink blood to survive. This connection between blood and life would later become the central to the vampire myth, particularly in the medieval period where the vampire's thirst for blood would be viewed not just as a hunger, but as a curse tied to the loss of life and the rejection of mortality. Bam. See, now we're starting to get closer to what we remember vampires as children. But that still doesn't even stop the fact that more cultures have this stuff in their history and their lore as well.
Let's keep going. West
Diving down the rabbit.
or east, depending on. Yeah, I guess this would actually be.
I mean,
east.
if you look at a map, the map isn't actually the way it looks. The way that they showed us in school is completely wrong.
East is west and west is east and north is south and south is north.
America's in the center of the world. What are you talking about?
Everyone's just trying to be the 52nd state. No, I'm just kidding. bad joke. Bad joke. Bad joke.
That's so fucking funny though.
I'm not going to say the Chinese version of this.
Jingashi, I think is how you would say it.
I'm not even going to try. I'm just going to call it the hopping vampire. The hopping vampire is one of the most iconic creatures of Chinese folklore. Unlike European vampires, which typically move in a more fluid human-like manner, the hopping vampire is stiff and moves by hopping. Oh, and this is 500 BCE to present, by the way. The movement is attributed to the rigor mortis of the corpse and its stiffness that leads to its distinctive jerky motion. So this is where the zombie walk comes from. How they are created. The hopping vampire are reanimated corpse that typically arise under very specific conditions. Commonly, these conditions include violent death.
Violence.
If a person died under a violent or unnatural circumstances, it is believed their soul might be restless or not fully departed from the body.
Once again.
Improper burial.
Once again.
Burials that failed to follow the proper rites and customs could cause the soul to be disrupted. A common belief was that the improper burial rites, whether due to hasty or hurried burials or lack of proper spiritual ceremonies, could cause a corpse to rise as the hopping vampire. Demonic influence. In some variations of the myth, the hopping vampire could be the result of a curse or demonic forces which prevented the deceased from entering the afterlife peacefully. And now we're going to come into some more attributes and behaviors of the hopping vampire. The creation was often associated with certain superstitions, such as those surrounding the feng shui of burial sites. If the dead were buried on cursed or improper aligned land, the soul could be disrupted, reanimating the body and turning into a hopping vampire.
That's so wild. It's not zombies. You got straight up hopping vampires. Although I did like this. Would you laugh or would you be fearful to see a Tigger-like vampire just bouncing his way at you?
I might laugh.
I might laugh, dude. That would be really funny. I'm just saying.
I don't even know what that looked like.
Just bouncing, just constant bouncing. Like, I'm going to get you. Oh my God. That's hilarious.
All right. So what did it look like? Well, it was typically a pale greenish complexion with a bloated body that seemed almost lifeless. Its eyes may be wide open and its mouth slightly agape, as if in a petrol state of hunger. A common feature is its stiff posture and slow, jerky movements.
Yeah, I'm laughing.
Chill. Which cause it. Pause. Unlike European vampires who drink blood, the hopping vampire does not feed on blood per se. Instead, it sucks the life or energy out of its victims. The hopping vampire primarily hungers for its vitality, and it is said to latch onto its victims, draining them of their energy until they are weak or even dead. Some myths also state the hopping vampire may feed on the breath of the living, often described as having a chilling, suffocating presence.
Okay, I have to pause here for a second because this is fucking hilarious. Just imagine this scene. You just turn the corner and there's an alley next to you. You look down the alley. You see this thing bouncing at somebody that's just standing there and they're like laughing and it just bounces on him, knocks him down, and it just starts giving him like gummies. It's not even like eating or biting him. It's just like, oh, and then it's like trying to kiss him. Yeah, it's like,
I feel like it would look like in Supernatural when the demons like come out of people, like the black
most
mist.
likely would probably. But like it's spooky to see it like probably up close to watch somebody's soul leave their body, but like from far away that would look like the funniest thing ever. Like Tigger's just making out with homeboy over there.
All right. So how do we defend ourselves from this thing? The hopping vampire are highly susceptible to certain protective measures. Of course, it's got a weakness. Every villain's got a weakness.
Everything does.
One of the most common methods to prevent the hopping vampire from attacking is the use of talismanic paper, typically inscribed with magical symbols or prayers, which can be affixed to the forehead of the creature to immobilize it. Salt, garlic, and mirrors were also believed to repel the hopping vampire. Much like the European vampire lore, the idea of hopping is a symbolic in some cases, as the creature is often unable to cross flowing water, or it might be distracted by loud noises. Dude, that's like the typical freaking zombie vampire type thing we know about today.
Yeah, it is.
Especially with the salt, garlic, and myrrh.
Right?
And that's the first time in history we're hearing about this, too.
Flipping reverse.
Interesting. Taoist priests often portrayed as the primary defenders against the hopping vampire, using rituals and magical charms to protect villages from the menacing entities.
God. Could you imagine though? Like I just keep them talisman like pieces of paper on me, and every time I see somebody bouncing, I just smack them on the forehead real quick. That would be hilarious to see that, I'm not gonna lie. So now we have, I think this is how you say it, Kraus, the Thai and Cambodian floating vampire. Now we got some floaty floats. See, now they're flying. This is the first indication that we're seeing that they're flying now.
Well, not really.
No, kind of. We'll see.
I mean, they just turned into owls not long ago.
True, but like you've seen the shows where they just get powers and they just start floating in the air and it's like, what the fuck?
Oh, okay. Yeah, so you're saying like levitation.
Yes, exactly. So it's like they're vampires, but they have like their own like distinct powers where like this one can like
They can shut gravity off.
Yeah, this one can fly. This one
Vampires
can
are not bound by gravity. That is a fact.
That's a fact. I'll fucking live on that hill. So, as terrifying female spirits, often described as decapitated heads that float through the air, oh my god, with glowing entrails trailing beneath it. This one is so just rock fucking metal as shit.
This is dope. I like this one.
Dope.
It's my favorite one so far.
Originating
Floating heads? Come on, people.
Dude, with entrails, that's crazy. All right, originating from Thailand and Cambodia, the Kraus is one of the Southeast Asia's most feared supernatural creatures. I mean, hell yeah, it's fucking scary. Floating heads? God. So, appearance and behaviors. The Kraus appear as a woman's head, which detaches from her body at night. The floating head is typically described as having long flowing hair with glowing phosphorescent entrails dangling beneath. The entrails are often shown to have a life of their own. Holy shit. This is metal as fuck. Trailing behind the Kraus as she flies through the night in search of her food. Her feeding habits. The Kraus is said to feast on blood. Yes, you guessed it, blood. Targeting pregnant women and newborns. What the fuck? This creature.
I knew it was coming. I knew
it was coming.
Was good.
We've seen the trail. The creature is said to use its floating form to sneak into homes and suck the blood of its victims. In some stories, the Kraus feeds on the flesh and organs of the living, with particular preference for their liver or intestines.
It's where the most nutrients are.
Dude, I know. The idea that the Kraus feeds specifically on human flesh and blood ties to the broader vampiric theme of draining life essence. Origins and creations. So the origins of the Kraus vary between regions, but the most common tales suggest that she was once a woman who practiced black magic or engaged in immoral behavior so a witch is what they're calling her.
Yeah.
Basically, as punishment, she was transformed into the nightmarish creature. In some versions, she was cursed into a Kraus after making a deal with a dark spirit, a demon reflecting the idea of malicious behaviors, leading to monstrous transformation. The methods of defense. You got to just like Jackie Chan that motherfucker. So much like the Jingashi or the hopping vampire, there are certain methods believed to ward off or protect oneself from the Kraus. Hanging sharp objects around the house. I don't advise that. So just don't forget you hung a knife from your door.
I was
Walk into it, please.
When you get here, don't forget to duck. What?
Just don't do that. And then sprinkling rice on the ground are said to make it difficult for the Kraus to pass. The creature is also said to be repelled by certain herbs or smells such as chili peppers. Oh my God. I can just imagine now, like people are just hanging the sharpest things they can find in their house at just eye level. Like, please don't do that.
Just walk right into a whole like draping of knives.
God. You've seen like the decor where it's like the beaded, like the things you walk through the entryways. Have you ever done that with barbed wire?
You ever done it with razor wire?
Yes, straight up.
Okay. I think for these next couple, unless there's like crazy different characteristics in them, we might just like buzz through them.
Right.
Okay, I'm putting this in chat so you guys can all see this. I'm going to try my absolute best to say this.
Manananagal.
Manananagal, the
That's what we're
vampire
going
from
with.
the Philippines. Is a creepy creature from Philippine folklore, often described as a woman who can sever her upper body and her lower half,
Jesus Christ,
leaving her
again?
torso to fly through the air in search of prey. The appearance shares many similarities for vampire legends around the world. During the day, the Managael appears as a normal woman, but at night she transforms into a horrifying creature with bat-like wings. Her
Here we
most
go.
distinctive feature is her ability to separate her upper torso and her lower torso. Her upper body having the arms, head, and everything up there, and then the lower half,
And then split.
so split in half right there.
Terrifying indeed.
Of course, she feeds on fetuses and pregnant women.
That's just a given. That's a fucking given.
I mean, that's just a given at this point in vampires. We just
Single
know
one.
that if there is a woman vampire, she is going to eat the children.
Apparently, the apex predator likes the easy targets.
Easy targets. I mean, think about it. Okay, let's put our eyes in the eyes of the predator.
Yes.
One life or two lives, which one is more life?
2
That's what they're looking for, right?
That's true. If they're essence seeking,
It's a 2 for 1.
It's a twofer. God,
BOGO.
we should
Buy
have
one,
put a
get
trigger
one.
warning.
Sorry, it's morbid. Sorry, we're morbid. This is a morbid channel. So
This is a morbid channel,
lighthearted, moral, comedic channel.
and I mean, like, once again, too, the next thing is like, how did they become what they are? Dark magic rituals. They were witchcraft, and it's the same thing that we've been saying every time. Most definitely.
All right, and we defend with salt, garlic, and holy water. That's first mention of holy
I was
water,
just gonna say,
really.
now we're getting into more like these newer styles that we
more
use.
of like, more of a Christian influence behind it. That's basically it.
You got to destroy the bottom half so the top half has nowhere to go to.
Yeah.
That's the only that's the gleaming difference here is you got to
then-
use the salt and the garlic to make the bottom half not attached back to the top half.
Yeah. So you take your salt, you throw it on the lower half, it salts it, and it can't
It's
combine.
like a slug.
Yep.
And then by dawn, you're safe. And this is also the first instance of dawn saving you, where vampires come out at night.
Good point. We haven't talked about that whole
That's
day
another
night
one.
cycle of the vampires' daily or ethereal appearances.
As it would be nowadays, but we're closely flying closer to the sun of nowadays, which now we're moving into like the Slavic and the Eastern European vampires, which is more so what we know from all of like the history that we've basically practiced and seen. So this is the 1100s to the 1800s. So you got your classic bloodsuckers here.
Classic.
So the Upir, the Slavic vampire. The Upir is a terrifying undead creature from Slavic mythology, is often cited as one of the earliest forms of vampire in Eastern Europe. This creature, like many other early vampire legends, was believed to rise from the grave, drink blood of the living, and has many of the same characteristics.
Words are hard. Our end still hard.
Still hard, always hard. But they have like all the characteristics of all our modern day vampires and what we know them as. So the Upir's origins are much older and more diverse, though, and as a different Slavic region would have the variation change as well. So we'll just go ahead and do the general appearance of what it is. It looks like a corpse with bloated body, dark bloodshot eyes, similar to the modern vampire is depicted.
Like in the thumbnail.
In the thumbnail, most definitely. However, some accounts suggest that the Upir could blend in with the living, making it especially terrifying as it often walked among villagers unnoticed, feasting on the blood and spreading sickness. So now this is where we get the idea of like, they just walk among us. Like they just live with us. So then the traits are, the Upir is believed to be a creature of the night. Once again, now we're seeing more of the trope of the night sucker. He's coming to get you only as the boogeyman of the night. But you could also see him during the day in some accounts, suggesting that it was a more versatile hunting ground in the nighttime. Vampires are often said to drain their victims' blood, but were also variations where the Upir could cause disease and even take the life force of the living, weakening them until they died with that disease. There were vulnerabilities, like the Upir could be destroyed by methods as staking the heart, decapitation, burning, and garlic holy water would repel it, protective amulets, all the stuff that we've basically been saying throughout all of the Egyptian and Mesopotamian stuff. Basically, it's still the same thing. It's just it's variations that we've seen just slowly sprinkle in throughout. And after that, we got another cool one because I'm
The
Polish. This one's cool.
Starzyga.
The Strigza?
Stridz. I don't know. Too many vowels in a row.
Too many vowels. Too many vowels.
The Strydzga is a practically eerie and fascinating creature in Polish folklore with a unique origin story that separates it from other vampires in the region. According to the legend, the Strydzga was not simply an undead being, but a human who was born with two souls.
This is interesting.
One of which could leave the body after death and return to feast on the living.
I have two souls.
Appearance often mirrored that of typical vampires, pale skin, sharp fangs, and a corpse-like appearance. However, there were some variations depending on the account, with some describing the Skirtska as having multiple sets of eyes or terrifying distorted face, sometimes even the claws or elongated teeth. It's first we've heard that, for sure.
That's what I'm saying, dog.
Most defining feature was its dual nature. It was born with two souls. One soul would remain in the body and the other would leave upon death and manifest as an evil spirit. The spirit would be responsible for draining the life force of blood of the living. Creation and transformation. The transformation of the Strydzga was believed to happen upon certain conditions. It could occur if a person was born with a second soul, often as a result of supernatural circumstances, such as a corpse or a consequence of sin. Alternatively, a person who led a practically wicked or immoral life could become a Strydzga after death. The Strydzga was thought to have the ability to rise from grave as its evil soul would return to process the body, making the corpse reanimated and bloodthirsty.
Crazy.
Eating habits. As a vampire-like entity, the Strydzga would feed on human blood or the life force. They would, of course, attack children or vulnerable members of society, and other accounts would equally opportune predator that would consume anyone who crossed its path. So it was pretty ruthless.
That is pretty fucking ruthless.
Do you take it out by a stake to the heart, burn it? That's
Exorcisms.
That's it.
All the stuff that we've been saying with all the last ones as well.
Yeah, no need to rehash the same thing.
No, but now we can move on to like the real life stuff, where like this is more of our touch our lifetime kind of stuff. So the real life vampire cases and the mass hysteria, which I don't necessarily believe that it's mass hysteria, but we always have to err on the side of caution to say it could be. So the vampire craze in Eastern Europe reached a fever pitch during the 17th and 18th centuries, as supposed cases of vampire activity led to mass hysteria, trials, and public executions. The myth of vampire became a central aspect of a rural life, and the fear of the undead often wrestled in horrific practices such as exhumations, decapitations, and stakings, infamous in Eastern European cases. So, some of these cases are Arnold Palo, Siberia in 1720s. One of the earliest and most famous vampire cases was that of Arnold Palo, a Siberian man who became infamous for his supposed transformation into a vampire after his death. Palo claimed to have been attacked by a vampire during his lifetime, and shortly after his death, local villagers reported that he had returned to terrorize them. Interesting. Palo's body was exhumed, and upon inspection, it was found to have fresh blood around his mouth and bloated, unnaturally healthy appearance, which led villagers to believe that he had been feeding on the living. In response, they drove a stake through his heart and burned his body. Jesus. The story of Palo, widely reported at the time, stoked fear throughout the region and led similar exhumations and vampire hunts. One that was closely related to this one was Peter, I don't know his last name, Plogojowicz.
Plogojowicz.
Yes.
Plogojowicz.
I can't even do it. Peter in Siberia in 1725. Another highly publicized case of vampirism was that of Peter Plo, a Siberian peasant who allegedly returned from the grave to kill multiple villagers after his death. Reports claim that Plo had appeared to several people in his community, draining their blood and causing them to die. When his body was exhumed, villagers found that it appeared unnaturally well preserved and fresh blood was found in his mouth. In a panic, villagers staked his heart and burned his body. The case of Plo further fueled the vampire hysteria and continued the widespread fear of the undead in Eastern Europe. These two cases were just the beginning of a larger wave of vampire-related events that terrorized the Balkans and beyond during the 18th century. As more bodies were exhumed and reports of vampire activity spread, vampiric hunts became common. In some areas, entire villages would take part in the ritualistic exhumation and destruction of bodies, using stakes, fire, decapitation to ensure the dead remained dead. Fucking A. That's crazy to think that now we are like, instead of witch trials, we have vampire hunts and vampire trials.
I'm surprised too that I don't know if we will talk about, but I do want to bring it up, is like how people thought Vlad the Impaler was potentially a vampire because he was said to drink blood.
No, he just was madman that liked to stake people.
Obviously, he was just a psychopath serial killer, but
yeah, and then he would put people's heads on stakes, and then he would drink their blood.
He would just do anything to make himself seem more evil.
Cause see that fear. Right there, dog. I'm a man.
Fear. He did what he did because he had the fear of the people.
Basically, yeah. Anybody could do whatever he wanted because
Vlad was definitely a huge like. Vlad the Impaler was a big Nosferatu, like all of that is inspired by Vlad.
Nosferatu.
Like the original Nosferatu, not the new one. All right. So the rise of vampire trials, the hysteria surrounding these vampire cases eventually led to official trials and executions. People believed that if vampires were not properly dealt with, they would continue to spread death and disease. Authorities in several countries, including Siberia, Hungary, and Poland, began to conduct trials of the undead. In some cases, the local clergy and sexual officials would join forces to investigate alleged vampire cases, leading to public executions of those suspected of being vampires.
We have straight up witch hunts, but they're vampire hunts. It's fucked. It's so fucked.
All right, I think we're going to dive into some fun stuff here.
This is what I've been waiting for all night.
The evolution into the modern vampire and their apex predator status. Modern vampire sightings, fact or fiction. While the vast majority of vampire sightings are dismissed as hoaxes or the product of overactive imaginations, there are numerous reports from around the world that suggest that people still believe in vampires, or at the very least, claim to have encountered them. Urban legends and sightings from the shadows of city streets to the quiet, isolated corners of rural areas, there are occasional reports of people encountering strange individuals with pale skin, unusual behavior, and unnatural allure. These modern vampires are often said to have hypnotic powers capable of drawing others into their orbit with mere eye contact or a soft voice. Whether the encounters are the result of a psychological condition such as a dissociative order or an extreme case of social isolation, or something more sinister at play, the sightings are undoubtedly fascinating. Are these individuals simply
Eccentric.
eccentric, or do they possess traits that seem far too vampiric to ignore?
I mean, this is where I find this fascinating, where it's like they could definitely blend with us if you ask me. I don't see why that's like so out of the like realm of possibilities.
That's their whole shtick.
That's what I'm saying. That's the whole shtick. Is like you don't, if you want to be a predator, you blend. What do you do in the wild? You blend into nature around you. What do you do in a city? You blend. How do you blend into a city? You go to the biggest population and you blend into that population. Easy. It's the simplest fact.
It's not hard to just conform and be unnoticed.
Mm-hmm. And then to have some unnatural tendencies. That's the other thing. That's it, though. But we have cryptid encounters. So beyond individual sightings, there are also reports of strange creatures that defy conventional explanation. Some modern vampire stories, particularly those in rural or wilderness areas, describes cryptid-like beings with glowing eyes, fangs, and a thirst for blood. These creatures are often linked to more ancient primal myths, but their sightings in remote parts of the world hint at the possibility that something akin to the vampire is still lurking, hidden from our view. Think about that one too. Is maybe they're not like how we say, like there's not a shit ton of them, and that there are vampire-like creatures out there, but there are also, the majority of them are in slumber, or there just isn't enough of them to do much to our populations.
Yeah, they probably just come out when they're hungry and go back to their sleep.
Very much so, dude.
Easiest way to not get caught is to not do something a bunch of times. If you're doing it once every 20 years, nobody's going to notice, especially if you've been doing it for 300 years.
That's what I'm saying.
But it also makes me think, like, why would the vampire that's been asleep for 50 years or whatever wake up? It would be completely missed with the times. It would have no idea what's going on. So how would it blend? Wouldn't know how to act, because the generation that it was alive in last isn't acting like the generation it's at now.
True.
But that's saying that it doesn't
That's a
wake
good
up
point.
more often.
Fuck. That's a tough one. Unless it's like when we see all these like indigenous people that are going missing in, say, like Alaska and other like foreign nations and stuff like that. It's because there's vampire-like creatures out in those nations, but they're also just like not assimilating. They're not going with the cool peeps in the town, and they're just like, fuck it, I'm ripping you straight out of your like existence. There's that possibility too, but that one's a lot more brutal.
Saying if it's like anything, it's like the show The Originals. That's what it's like.
I would think so. I would have to say, if I could derive anything from what we would think like modern vampire tropes are, that's probably the most close.
I'm not lying. If you love vampires and
it's a good show,
need a new show, there's like 8 seasons there. It's crazy.
It's a good show.
Real life vampires, cults, blood feasts in the modern world. While the existence of supernatural vampires is debatable, there are real life groups and individuals who encourage in blood drinking rituals as part of their beliefs and practices. These cults and subcultures adopt vampiric imagery and embrace the idea of consuming blood as a way to gain power, transcend their physical limitations, and experience a sense of connection with the supernatural. Vampire communities in cities like New Orleans, Los Angeles, and London, there are communities of individuals who self-identify as vampires. These people do not claim to be supernatural entities, but instead they engage in ritualistic blood drinking as a form of spiritual, emotional fulfillment. Members of these vampire communities often describe their need for blood as an insatiable thirst that cannot be satisfied by food or drink. The blood is typically donated by willing participants, often in controlled consensual environments that we know of.
That was to say, that sounds so dangerous.
Despite their non-supernatural nature, these modern-day vampires often embrace an aesthetic and lifestyle that mirrors their traditional vampire lore, dressing in dark clothing, adopting pale skin, and holding secretive and nocturnal gatherings.
I'm sorry, but if like Jimmy over there in the corner is just cutting his hand and just dripping into a cup, and everybody's like, "Pass it around, I want it warm." I'm sorry, but
That's how you
Ow.
get diseases. Are they testing this blood? Like,
No, dude, they're not. They're
that's how you make
whatever he
bloodborne
was doing, he's
pathogens.
dripping.
That's what that
Like,
sounds like to me.
it sounds like a good. It sounds like a quick way to go to the hospital with fucking HPV, dog. Like, nope, no thanks. I mean, that's just straight up cult like behavior. I'm just saying that.
It's culty. I
It's
mean,
a
we're talking
cult.
about cult.
Now we're gonna talk about cults.
Throughout history, there have been numerous instances of cult-like groups that believed in the power of blood and the immortality associated with drinking it. Some cults, such as Vampire Church, founded in the 1990s, sought to integrate the idea of vampires into their spiritual practices. These groups often use blood as a symbol of life force and strength, emphasizing themes of eternal life and immortality. While most of these cults operate within the confines of the law, their practices raise ethical and legal questions, especially when it comes to the procurement and consumption of human blood.
Yeah. I mean, like that's
We're
such a
just talking
gray
about that.
area.
It's just like there's just some weird I don't care if it's like voluntarily. That's just like weird, man.
I don't know, dude. I just don't know if I could drink somebody else's blood, even
I mean, we've all
willingly.
like poked our finger and like, did that. The little
Yeah, the little like or like you like bite your tongue and it bleeds, like, yeah. But like to drink to willingly
we've
pass
all
a
bit
cup
on a
of somebody
key.
else's blood around.
It tastes like a key.
For fun, I don't think I could do it. Nope. But notable case. So one of the most infamous real life cases involved so-called vampire clan in Florida in the 1990s. See, we're really not far off of where we were talking. We've really spanned lifetimes here. This group, which was led by self-proclaimed vampire named Rod Farrell, became notorious for their belief in the vampiric power and their involvement in the brutal murder of a couple. This is where we take it too far, guys. Although this case is often viewed as the result of a combination of mental illness, cult beliefs, and criminal behavior, it still echoes the darker side of vampire myth and its potential influence on vulnerable individuals. Which, like, the victims are definitely the real, like, that's the real story there, always. But, like, god damn, dude, like, why?
I can see the headlines now. Florida man thinks he's a vampire.
That's what I'm saying. And of course it's fucking Florida. Like, you know what I mean? Like, of course it's fucking Florida.
All right. Now, are vampires hiding among us? The question of whether vampires are hiding among us today is an intriguing one. While there is no concrete evidence to support the idea that a blood-sucking immortal creature roams the earth, the persistence of vampire myth and the rise of modern vampire subculture suggests that there may be more to this phenomenon than meets the eye. Psychological and social factors. Some psychologists argue that the vampire myth has endured because it taps into deep-seated fears and desires. The vampire represents both a taboo and a seduction, death and immortality, darkness and desire. In modern society, where people are often aligned or disconnected from their physical and spiritual selves, the vampire myth offers a powerful symbol of transformation, escape, and the breaking of social norms. It's not hard to see how certain individuals may adopt vampiric imagery and behaviors as a means of asserting power or finding purpose in an often indifferent world.
An indifferent world we do live in, indeed. I do see where it could grab some people and be like, I want power now. But like at the same time, you know you're not a supernatural being. Like we are not. I know I'm not. Personally, definitely know I'm not. I just don't know if I want to identify as one. And even so, like,
Some people feel different.
I'm all here for it. But at the same time, like, let's not like go out of bounds here and start killing people because of this. Or like,
Probably
I'm
it's already too late for that.
That's what I'm saying. I mean, like, I'm gonna just go forcefully take blood from people. Like, express yourself. But this is
Not
one where
like
like
that.
there's levels to that shit, young boy.
Keep your teeth off people's necks, dog.
That's all I'm saying. Like, I'm all for expressing, but like, oh god, this one's scary because it's like if you just like flat out say like, do what you do, express yourself. There is literally like a point to where like expressing yourself too much as a vampire could probably lead to a lot of potential dangers.
Just a couple.
just a couple. So we have subcultures and identity. So for some people, identifying as a vampire as a way to carve out an alternative identity in a world that increasingly values individuality and self-expression, vampires in this sense are seen not just as mythical creatures, but as symbols of defiance and empowerment. This is where I find it good. Just when you go defiant and like powerful, like let's not run wild with that. And then vampires in that sense are not just those creatures, but like you see it through immortality, strength, you know, like fertility, like divine, like good looks. That's what you're trying to evoke with that.
I mean, I think vampires is the opposite of fertility.
Well, it depends on the way
you about a
look
lot
at
of baby eating.
Hold on, we did talk about a lot of baby eating, but they're spawning more vampires. So, like in a sense, you could say it is a circle.
Fair point. Fair point.
There has been a lot of fucking baby eating though, and I'm not here for any of it. Like what the fuck, vampires? When I think of vampires, I think of blood. I think of people dying to that. I don't think of straight up child mutilation, dude. What the fuck?
I don't know.
Oh, it's brutal.
The shadowy nature of vampires. So, vampires, both in myth and in modern culture, are often associated with sorcery and the unknown, just as the vampire lurks in the shadows, feeding when no one is looking. So too the certain aspects of the vampire lifestyle remain hidden. Could it be that in our modern world, there are still those who secretly live as vampires, feeding on blood or energy in order to maintain their power and sustain their unique existence? Is it possible that Is it a possibility that keeps the myth alive and shrouded in mystery?
Is it? Or are they our ultimate predators that still are here and killing all of us? We think so. I think so. So vampires have long been depicted as the ultimate predator, creatures that feed on the life force of others in order to maintain their immortality. They are both beautiful and terrifying, capable of seducing and then destroying their victims without remorse. Their ability to exist outside the boundaries of life and death, their supernatural powers, and the relentless thirst for blood make them a perfect metaphor for our deepest fears and desires. Whew, doggy. But I mean, the question does remain. Are they truly just a myth? Or are they a shadow of something darker, hiding just beneath the surface of our reality? Whether they walk among us today, or whether their existence is continued to, or confined to just folklore, the vampire's allure continues to captivate and terrify, ensuring that the myth will endure for generations to come. Are we merely telling stories, or are we speaking of something far more real? Something that could be lurking in the shadows, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. But only time will tell. We're fucked. All I'm saying is we are fucked. In time, we are
Trevor,
going to
break
die.
down why do you think vampires are the ultimate predator? Human predator.
Well, if we look at today's modernistic theories and all of this goodness, right? We are the apex predators. We are the top of the food chain. We are the most cream of the crop, intelligent beings that create our own tools, our societies. We are collectively like deciding what the earth looks like with the way that we change it because what we need. But you're telling me that we don't, there is just nothing out there for us that is a predatory being. I would say aliens probably are one, which we don't really touch that theory often either. But if these vampire theories that exist from fucking BE to CE to like modern day are real, which I do think they are, that we are going to see an influx in people disappearing, people dying, being drained of blood. And that is what that basically probably would solve the overpopulation and all of that goodness, because it is the Earth's way of showing like, hey, we don't need to cull the populations with tidal waves and things like that. It's literally a creature that has lived among us for many years.
So what does it do? Does it just pop in and out? Does it hibernate for
I would
years, or is it always there? That's what
I would
question.
think that there was something that had happened, right? So like how the earth is ever changing, like maybe something happened with our climate that like wasn't necessarily in line with what they needed for the correct living style that they need to also inhabit, or men themselves doing these witch hunts caused them to go into hiding, and now they're just waiting for the right time to strike. Because like if you think about it, like populations were more dense, they were more intertwined back then. Once one gets caught and found out, now everybody's eyes are on that. Nowadays, nobody really thinks those are real. Everybody thinks that it's just a movie trope. It's fun, right? But once the population hits like 4 billion, 5 billion, where it's just like you're not allowed to have 2 children anymore. Like that type of bullshit. I think that's when they're going to strike.
This is interesting, Butters. In 2 cases, the bodies found of horrible mutilated people by aliens were completely drained of blood, not a drop of it. So there's that too, with like people linking cattle mutilations and blood drained creatures because of aliens.
Well, what if this theory then? So what if these aliens are bringing these predators just for fun, just dropping them
It's like
off?
a game show. They're
Let's
like, it's
see
the
what
year of the vampire, the new season 42 of Vampires on Earth.
We are literally just the pawns. You know what I mean? Like we're just flesh bags that live our mortal lives, living mundane life, doing what we do. But then you add that added level of like, okay, well, if they go and do their mundane things, but we add this predator into the mix, what happens? I mean, it's going to be brutal as shit, but maybe that's what they're into.
Yeah, I mean, think about it. What if someone's dealing with a vampire right now and you just don't even know about it?
I mean, the vampires could just be the fucking aliens. We don't know that either. Like, they could straight up just be like, we walk
Could
among
be.
you guys, but we're
Think
just
about
straight
it.
up aliens.
Think about it. Just think about it for a second.
Stew on it.
Ancient Egyptians, aliens, gods, vampires.
All the same thing.
Could all be the same thing.
I mean, that's the god honest truth too, though. That's the scary part, is like a lot of these cryptids that we see could literally be one thing. That's many things that your brain just can't comprehend, but it is a completely real ass thing. But it's much more than we thought.
Like aliens. Exactly.
Aliens. It always boils back to aliens. I'm just saying, you know, the fun theory for me is that we're just living in a sim and a game show type dealio, like the Truman Show, and they're just bringing us fun, crazy, fucked up creatures to just be like, hey, you guys need another fucking nightmare? Here you go.
I don't know if I'll be Google searching that, but
That's the thing, though, is like we get these accounts of like drained animals, drained people, and they immediately go aliens. But what if it's actually vampires? We could go both ways with it. And then the same with the rising of the dead. Well, is that not a zombie?
right, is a vampire a zombie?
Is it a form of zombie? Now are we like crossing dimensions here? Like, am I crazy?
I don't know. You know what isn't crazy though?
If you like and subscribe.
That's right. If you haven't yet, make sure you like and subscribe and join the night crew on our road to 1,000 subscribers.
Ding ding.
Ding ding. Cheap plug. But I
Cheap
think it's a
plug.
good point to wrap it up, because I think I don't really have anywhere else to go with
We could beat this
vampires.
donkey until it squeals, but I mean,
Yeah. Maybe we'll do a follow-up episode on vampires one day. Let us know down in the comments below if we should follow up on vampires and dive into maybe some other parts of the lore that we didn't even touch, like
But
all
I
the
like
pop
that
culture stuff. And
I like the cultural side of it because it really gives you a good idea of where it's like vampires aren't just one dimensional. They're very
Yeah.
much so diverse.
really wanted to like look into the origins, like why is there stories of vampires? Where did it all start? And
Mhm.
how did it progress through history? Because that's
We all know what vampires are. We all know what they bees now. We've seen the movies. We've gone through the castle stuff. Like I love that stuff. It's fun to me too, but this is where it's like this is where you really have to think about it. Like, is this shit real? I think so.
right. Exactly. When you look at all of the lore, you tie it together with history, it becomes very interesting.
Very much so does.
And with that being said, folks, I want to thank you for joining us tonight. We love
guys
you
the
all.
best.
And if you should always remember, keep your ears and eyes open for it really goes.
Bump in the night.
Peace.
You guys rock. See you next
Love you.
week. Mwah.